Morning or afternoon, whatever it is for you guys, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day. It's that time of year where we're not really transitioning to a new season completely, but it's always an evolving process in our garden. And this is the time when I take a step back and I look at the varieties and see what I do and don't like. And I just kind of want to show you with these tomatoes the benefits of each one and how they are and aren't working for me this year. First one we've got over here, and by the way, there's nothing like having a little bit of grower's remorse when you're deep into the season. But these are the Ace bush tomatoes, and I tell you, they live up to their name. They are definitely bushes, but they're looking pretty good. They are very, very big plants though. And I gotta say, if I knew that if I had any idea that they would be this big, I probably wouldn't have grown them. These are a determinate type, but let's see here. You can see how they're kind of all coming out of the cage completely. So what I can do is I might have to come out here and just really get down in it and look and see how like this stem's coming out, and then I may tie it up just to keep it out of the other plants. So I may work around that. But I want to say, with all of these tomatoes that I've grown this year, there was one objective I had. Typically I grow Roma tomatoes, and it seems to me like every 2 years I kind of step away from them and then step back to them. But we wanted to get bigger slicer tomatoes, and so we're kind of accomplishing that with most of the varieties. These Ace bush tomatoes, which I picked these specifically because I wanted to get an heirloom determinate slicer tomato. There's like a lot of prerequisites to fill there. So we wanted to be able to save the seed from a tomato, and that's why we did this whole bed over here all by itself, so we would be able to do that. And I will say this, I'm not real sure about the production of them, but I will say, and I've left this down here for this video so I could show you, but the size of the tomatoes are really what we wanted. They're nice sized tomatoes. I haven't even gone in here and really looked to see what else is forming. To be honest, I was just gonna wait until I see red. I see it looks like the plant, if we come back here, it looks like it produces in clusters of 3. So being that it's a determinant, what we're seeing is, you see how there's tomatoes across the board down low? They will slowly start going higher and higher until the plant stops producing. That's what I've noticed every year with the Romas, is you start picking them low and then you end picking them high. And once they get high, that plant's basically done. And that's the beauty of a determinate tomato for me. I can tell when they're growing and what they're doing and how they're doing, and go in, you know, from there, so we can pull them out and get the next thing in. Now these other varieties, it's a different story. All of these are determinate. So most of what's in this bed is, let me get to the back side of it. Oh, it feels so much better in the shade. There's six Red Snapper tomatoes, and then the front row are the Heinz 57 tomatoes. And so I specifically wanted to grow these. They're hybrids, but they put on nice sized tomatoes. You can see, and we've been getting a couple of these already. You can already see we've got some redding going on there, some ripening. And these were planted earlier, but this bed gets a lot of shade. So I will say this about this plant. You can see that this plant is not as bushy, which I do like that. The only downside of it is a hybrid, so we can't save the seed. I mean, you can save the seed, but it won't be as traditional. So I don't know, but I like the way that this plant is growing. It's not as bushy, and it's more, there's a lot more air that can get through it, which means in the long run, there's gonna be less disease in it. I haven't paid too much attention, but you can see we may have to eat some green tomatoes right here with this. I'm not sure how that's gonna work out because it's torn because it's so heavy. Let's see, how can we, I'm gonna have to do something about that. Yeah, we're gonna have to tape that. And so what I can do is I could simply just get some duct tape and put it together. I can have fried green tomatoes, which is probably what I'll end up doing. But these are nice sized tomatoes too, which I am very happy with that. You can see here, we'll harvest these tomorrow probably. I'll give them one more day out here and then move them on. But they're coming right along, and I need to give them another dose of fertilizer, but you can see we've definitely got them moving up as well. I don't know how many of these are going to produce, and there's a bunch of variables here. So for these, it's hard because they're in a more shady area. You can tell, like right now, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They get right now, it's almost the summer solstice, and they're getting right at 6 to 7 hours of sun. So there's not a lot of sun. So that could be affecting how much they grow as far as how much they'll produce. But the way the plant looks seems to be what I've seen in other places. So, and across the board, they're all like that. So that's a good sign. I wish I would have put a ace bush out here to see, but I didn't. So, you know, it is what it is. Now the Heinz 57 is a different story altogether. You can see here, we've got them, and that one's done. This seems to be roughly about the size we're getting, which isn't terrible. You know, I don't know how you feel about it, but even over here you can see, and these plants seem to be significantly smaller, but they're not getting as big as the red snappers. So what does that mean? I mean, it means a lot of things. One is slicer wise, like this one in particular, not so much, but it's still a good eating size tomato. And we wanted to get big slicers this year. It's been a couple years since we've grown them, so we wanted to focus on that. Now, as far as the growth traits of these two plants go, is very interesting, and thinking about how I can apply this in the future in my garden. Because I look around and I'm seeing, if you just look straight back, it's just a wall of tomato plant, basically. And then if you look over here, you can see that it is definitely airy and more, I would say, just less susceptible to disease. And so I can take this bed right here, and let's just say we did all of the red snappers, which is, I probably will not grow the Heinz 57 ones again. So if we do all of the red snappers, we can fit a lot more in this bed as far as I'm concerned, and be comfortable with the amount of disease that we're propagating. And because it's going to happen, invariably it's going to happen. But once we get that, then we can kind of figure out from there. Ace bush, for instance, see if I can weave my way over to it. I think I should have put half of the tomatoes in here. So there's 6 plants in here, and I should have probably put 3 plants in the back, giving them plenty of room, and then maybe put some peppers up here. Really wanted to monocrop tomatoes this year. I wanted to see how that went for me, and although it's not as great as it could have been, I do like it. I think it's working out pretty good. It's, as of right now, you know, we know that when this bed is done, it's a free bed to do whatever we want with. Versus if we came in and we had half, or you know, a row of these peppers right here, then we would have an empty spot in the back and then an open spot in the front, or an empty spot in the back and a spot filled with tall peppers in the front, which just causes like a really bad shading situation. So I'm just kind of taking this year and taking a step back and saying, what's going to work good in my garden for the next year? Like, how can I improve it? You know, for instance, if I'm going to do the red snappers again, I don't need, you know, and I want to get another hybrid, I can mix those two together and kind of work out a plan for that. But it looks like next year I'm going to grow probably, and this all depends, we're still really early, we're just starting to get tomatoes now. So we're looking at how much production comes out of each plant. That's what we really want to know. And then we can narrow it down. But it looks like for right now, we would probably end up doing the red snappers and the ace bush, as well as our Roma tomatoes. And so I need to figure out, like next year, I'll definitely have probably a bed of Roma tomatoes, because you just get so many. And that's the other thing, is with these tomatoes and these plants that give you bigger fruits, in my experience, you get less produce than if you got smaller fruit. So the Roma tomatoes, you pick those all day long. You know, we'll come out and get 15 every couple days, whereas these it'll probably be 1 or 2. Now it may stretch farther when you're cooking it or preserving it. I don't know that just yet, but typically speaking, you'll get more poundage, is the word I'm looking for, out of the Roma tomatoes. The other side of the token, it really works out to where are my tomatoes going in the next year. And so next year, we plan to either put tomatoes in this bed or this bed back here. And so that's gonna make a lot of difference too, because now if we put it in this bed, we have a whole nother bed behind it that's gonna be thought about for shading purposes. And so just looking at it in that direction, we would need to put our red snappers here, and then we would need to put our Roma tomatoes and Ace Bush tomatoes in this bed, just to kind of eliminate any shading that could take place. So now that I'm starting to build a better repertoire, like I've figured, it took me a couple years to figure out what do I want in a tomato? Like what are the requirements for me to grow? And so the requirements for me are, it doesn't have to be heirloom, it doesn't have to be hybrid, but I do need at least a heirloom determinate variety. All of my tomatoes that I want to grow are determinants because of the heat here and the humidity that we get. It just seems over the years has worked a lot better. And then now we need to really, because of this year, we were able to really see, and without relying on our memory at all, because we planted different types, what the bush types and non-bush types look like when they grow. And so that really is going to factor into the future as well, because typically the Roma tomatoes, they're all basically bush type, obviously the Ace Bush, but when I look at those red snappers, it's a totally different looking tomato. It's a totally different growth pattern, which means it's a totally different way to place it in your garden and have it surrounded by things. So at this point in the year, in the season, this is when I'm starting to walk around and I'm taking notice of the different varieties and different plants growing and thinking to myself, how do I apply this next year? Because I'm always looking ahead. I'm very, I guess you could say, methodical about what I put in, but you got to try things out. You know, I've grown some things that were supposed to be bush varieties that haven't been, but that Ace Bush definitely turned out to be a bush variety. And so knowing that, we know that we need, our plant density for next year needs to be less. So even though this isn't growing the way I want and it's taking up more space than I had anticipated, does that make it a failure? Absolutely not. This is a test year. We knew we were going to be a test year. We have tomatoes. We have healthy plants that are flowering all the way up to the top. So we know what's coming out of here. So I think it's definitely not a failure. It's just it's a learning lesson. And this is the way that you progress in your gardening abilities from year to year. Every year you will do something like this and you will make some kind of adjustments, and this is how you learn. And the next year you'll come back, you'll watch a video about the same time next year, you'll see a totally different story. That's the goal, at least, right? So it's always a learning process, and getting into varieties and really paying attention to their growth habits and production habits can completely change the way you garden, and also change the way that you use your produce and the way you have to use your produce, because some things may be overactive and some things may be underactive. So you could use a plant that's underactive, that's not as productive, and let's just say like an indeterminate that's not as constantly productive, and that can be your fresh eater. And then you can come back and you can do something like a determinate or a different variety that is overactive, and that can be your preserver and your fresh eater and everything else under the sun. So it's just food for thought.